Okay, so this session is hosted by Pulse Turing Center. Now, we are located in ECG 104, and we provide both in-person and virtual tutoring for all major engineering courses. So, if anyone needs any additional help outside of classes, I highly recommend stopping by. S- Uh, so, before we start the session, just a small Q&A. How many people have heard about the Turing Center before? Okay, good. So people do know about the Turing Center. Cool. Well, for those of you who don't know, so this is where it's located. So it's kind of like tucked in inside, so it might not be visible right up front. So this is where the Turing Center is located. So let's start with the exam review. So this is the agenda for today. We'll be covering all these topics. So let's start. So, tracing assignment sequences. When tracing assignment sequences, the most important rule is that the code runs from top to bottom, and each assignment updates the variable immediately. You should always track the values step by step, and if needed, write down the values of variables after each line. So, let's look at this example here. Can anyone tell me what the output of this code is going to be? Yes, it would be three. Um, okay, let's move on. So, swapping variables. Now, this example demonstrates swapping two variables using a temporary variable. So, can anyone tell me what the output's going to be over here? Anyone? Well, we begin with x equals, okay, someone answered it. It's 3. Yeah, the answer is 3. So we begin with x equals 13 and then y equals 3. And then we're creating a temporary variable called a, and then we're just assigning the value of y to it. So a is currently 3. And then we're swapping values of y and x. So now y is going to be 13 and x is going to be a, which is 3. So the answer is 3. Let's move on to the next one. So valid Java identifiers. An identifier is simply a variable name. There are a few important rules. So it must start with a letter, underscore, or a dollar sign. It cannot start with a number. It cannot contain spaces, and it cannot contain special characters like hyphens, ampersands, or exclamation marks. And it cannot be a reserved Java keyword. So the top photo over here is are like examples of valid Java identifiers, and then the photo at the bottom is an example of invalid Java identifiers. Evaluating math expressions. So when evaluating math expressions in Java, remember the order of operations. Parentheses first, and then we do multiplication, division, and modulus, and then we do addition and subtraction. If you're working with integers, division will drop the decimal. It does not round, it truncates. So let's look at the first example here. Can anyone tell me what the output is going to be? The top photo. And feel free to open your mic and just say the answer out loud. Yes, the answer is 16. So in this expression, the first expression, so a plus b modulus c times d. First, we evaluate the modulus. Uh, so yeah, then we multiply and then we add. So after you do it in that order, the answer is going to be 16. Similarly, for the second example, can anyone tell me what the output is going to be? Yes, that's right. So first we perform the multiplication and division, and then after we compute those values, we perform the subtraction, and at the end we get 665. Okay, Java primitive types. So Java has 8 primitive data types. So they are byte, short, int, long, float, double, character, and Boolean. Now, let's look at primitive literals. So let's talk about the floating point numbers. So if you write a decimal like 5.25, Java treats it as a double by default. If you want it to be a float, you must add an F at the end. So 5.25 is a float, 5.25F, and 5F is also a float. But if you don't mention the F over there, then Java treats it as a double. And for characters, we use single quotes and it can only contain one character. If you want to create like a string, you need to use double quotes. Expression data types. When different numeric data types appear in an expression, Java always promotes it to the larger type. For example, in the first picture here, we have 7.0 divided by 3f. Since 7.5, sorry, 7.0, it's a double, and since double is larger than a float, the result is going to be a double. In the second example, we have 3f plus 5. Since the float is larger than the integer type, it's going to promote it into a float, so the result will be a float. So just remember, Java promotes upward, and it does this to avoid losing precision. So always the larger type wins. Declaring variables. So when So to declare a Boolean, for example, you can write Boolean A and then semicolon. So that would declare the variable. And then to initialize it, you can just do A equals false. So in this picture, it's actually incorrect. You don't need to write Boolean in the second line. So just writing Boolean A would declare the variable. And then just writing A equals false would initialize it. And then if you want to do it in the same line, then you can do it like in the second picture, we are initializing a double. So just double x equals 90.24. So it will declare and initialize it in the same statement. Okay, and now my friend will take over from here. Oh.
Okay, hello everyone. Just a quick introduction of me before we actually start with the the methods. So I'm Tam Pham. You can just call me Tam. Um, I'm one of the CSE 100, 110, 205 tutor at the FSC Post Tutoring Center. And let's start with our review session. So the first thing. that I will be present right now is how to use the string class methods. They are really important because it actually takes up a significant amount of scores in the review document, and they're actually quite intuitive. But let's start with what we have, okay? Um, so first is the char add method. You can call it character add. I'm fine with that. So it is a simple method. The character at I method returns the character at index I within string s. So our example, the declaration string s equal ghosts and devils with the underscore as the spaces. The expression as character at 3, which is the character at index 3 of string s, is gonna be capitalized S. That should and the method the will return the value of a character, not a string. And moving on to our next method that is called, hold on. Can you change to the next slide, please? Okay, wonderful. Okay, compare to. The next method that we're gonna discuss about is compare to. The S1 compared to S2 will return the negative value if S1 is considered less than S2, and a positive value if S1 is considered greater than S2. And if you want to know what will be returned when they are the same, then it will be returned 0. And the comparison is then lexicographically, which mean is gonna compare each character's Unicode value of the strings, and they are compared one by one. So a string is less than another string when the Unicode value of the whole string is less than the other one. So the declaration S1 equals a banana and S2 equals banana. The expression of S1 compared to S2 less than 1 actually returns true because it will return a negative value. Because A, as you can see in S1, it start with the letter A, and S2 start with the letter B. And A is considered less than B because A comes before B. So it will return a negative value. Therefore, the expression S1 compared to S2 less than 0 is true. Okay, I think we can move to the next slide, which is equals. Equals is more like a more intuitive version of compare to. Um, instead of returning a value that indicates whether a string is more than or less than another string, it will only return whether the two string to be compared if they are the same or not. And this is quite simple. As you can see, if string 1 s1 equals caret, s2 also equal caret, then the expression now is gonna be true. But I have a small question for you. Instead of s1 equals caret, let me type that out, but so that you can follow along. S2 equals caret. What if instead I have this declaration? Can anyone tell me if that's gonna return true or false? Okay, wonderful. Yep, the characters are different. So one thing that you always have to remember in programming is that almost all methods are case sensitive, which means the capitalized character are considered different to the lowercase letters. Wonderful. Yeah, we can move on to our next method that is called index of. Index of is also quite intuitive. So the S index of C return the index which string C occurs for the first time in string S, and -1 if the string C is not found in S. So given the following declaration, can you explain to me why the expression is gonna return -1? Okay, of course, there's no capital A in the string. So that's gonna return -1. Um, how about, hold on, how about this? Okay, okay, wonderful. Yeah, that's the first place where the letter A occurs. So that's gonna return 1. Okay, we can definitely move on to next um, our next method that is called length. Length is really intuitive. Length is just basically the length of the length of a string. And oh, that's just some formatting issue that I had. This expression, it should have been length, but okay. Let me actually type that out for you all. Um, S dot. Okay, it's actually this one. Yep, it returns the amount of character and white spaces. By the way, white spaces is also considered a character. So yeah, also white spaces starting from. I mean, you can say that it's starting from one. That's a really good way to think of that. But I want this to be as intuitive as possible. But to be as intuitive as possible, so I would say the number of characters. And it has no argument inside the two parentheses of length, by the way. But s dot length equals the number of characters. So BANANAS white space AND white space APL PLES white space ARE then white space YUMMY and then a full stop and then full stop. So that's gonna be 29. Okay, we can definitely move on to our next um our next method that is called substring. Substring is the method that returns the substring of S from index A inclusive to index B exclusive. And what do I mean by that? Let's definitely have a look at our example. Um, Our example says string S equals apples and bananas and yummy, the sentence with a full stop. The expression from S substring from S from 1 to 3 returns PP because it starts at index A inclusive, so that means it include the letter at index A, which is index 1, which is P. Then all the way to 3, you can start counting. 1 is P, 2 is also P, 3 is L, but since index B exclusive, which means it doesn't include the letter at index 3, that means it's only gonna return PP. So I have another small question for you. What if instead of substring 1, 3, I have substring, substring, and then 2 or 4. Okay, wonderful. Mhm. Now that you already know how to use substring, we can definitely move on to quite a difficult part that is called trace and evaluate code with multiple methods. But instead of overthink this, I would say this is just basically the correlation between the methods themselves. You're learning how to understand the relationship between the methods. So for the purpose of CSE 110, you can just always assume that that executions always start at the main method. So we can just go ahead, have a look at main method. Then we can see it start by calling another method called foo with no argument in it. And inside the foo, it has a declaration integer x equal 15. And it's gonna print x. Then this is where you're gonna have a question. Will it print 15 or will it print 3? And before answering that question, I have some important notes for you to think of. A variable declared inside a method, for example, x equal 15 in foo, is local to that method block with foo. Therefore, it cannot affect variables outside of it, which means if there is um, which mean if there is x equal 15 inside foo, after foo has ended, it cannot be accessed outside of the foo method. And a variable declared a class, which is the whole thing that you see here, public class main, the really large block over there. It is it is a field. It is considered a field, and it is accessible from the other static methods in the class. So let's definitely have a look here. The main the main method is always the one that is executed first. It's called foo. X equal 15 is inside the foo method, but then the print statement wants to use x. But then which one is the x that is accessible by the main method? What do you think? Okay, so for the x value that for the x variable that is actually accessible by the main by the main method is actually x equals 3 because it is declared as a field within it is declared as a field within the class called main, and then that's the reason why it is the one that is accessible by the main method, not the one that says x equal 15, because that one is only local to the foo method. And also, by the way, foo doesn't really return anything, so it's just there for actually not quite meaningful for the foo method to say that. But overall, x equal 15 is only local to foo. The other one that is called a field within the main class, since main is a member of the main class, it can access x equal 3. Okay, we can definitely um, move on to the multiple another multiple method one. Okay, let me answer some question as well. Is substring a method that can be used with just one argument? Of course, it cannot be used with just one argument because for substring you need a starting value, which is whichever index that you wanted to start at, and then something that you wanted to end at. Um, there's a similar method in Python, by the way, if you want to know more. It can actually be used with just one argument, but in Java, substring is not implemented that way. And if it were typed just as x equal 15 instead of integer, would it have printed 15? Okay, for that method, if you says x equal 15, then it is okay. If you says x equal 15, let me see if static void group. Okay. Can we move to the previous slide so that I can answer the question? Okay. Integer x equal 15. It is private and it is static, so it can change x equal 3 with it. It can, but then there's an error actually. If you think of this, it is trying it is trying to adjust the x variable before the x variable is declared, because the foo function is actually in front of the the static integer x equal 3 declaration. Therefore it will create an error. If you want to fix that, that's the reason why in actual implementation you always want the initialization, which means you put a variable and you put the values in it. You always want the initialization to comes first and then the methods to comes later. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Since the declaration comes after the method, then it will create an error. And I think we should be good to continue with our next slide, which is uh, another trace and evaluate code with multiple methods. But then now we have all the way to 3 methods. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, wonderful. Okay, a few important point that you always have to remember for this kind of problem. Parameter are copied, and let me show you what I mean by that. Integer a, since I said that main is always going to be executed, you can see that a equals foo 8, then the value 8 is then going to be copied to another function called foo. Then let's see what's going to be at the function foo. When you pass number 8 into function foo, it will create a local variable that is called a, that is local to foo, which means it sits inside the foo function only. But then the value a is going to be equals to the input, that is another a, minus 2, that is 6. Then it's going to execute bar 6. The bar 6 is going to, with bar 6, is going to, the first line of the bar method is going to subtract the number 6 to get 5. Then it's going to print 5. Then it's going to add 1, which effectively returns the value r. If the value a itself, which is 6, then the first a, is gonna give 6. See, you can definitely see that it's so confusing listening to me explain this. So there's definitely is a way for you to have a look at this. And by the way, I always recommend having a scratch paper with you when you do this kind of problem, because to me, it is honestly too complicated to do that, to do mental math with this. So it's always super recommended to have a scratch paper with you when you do this kind of problem. And for the purpose of the purpose of a review session, I I will be able to give you this visualization. Copy link. Okay, let me go through this visualization first, and then I will answer the question, okay? So, if you go ahead and copy the link that I have, then paste that to your browser, you can see yourself. Definitely try this yourself. Definitely. Try this yourself. Um, Paste that to your browser, then you're gonna have yourself. Then you're gonna have yourself another version that you can try on. But let me try to share my screen actually. Okay, let me Java visualize. I'm already at the middle step of this, but okay, let me skip all the way back to step 1. The frame means 3, which that means it's gonna execute line 3 of the main method. Then it's gonna start at foo 8. Then what's the next step? Just like I said, 8 is gonna be passed through 8 is gonna be passed through the foo method. Then main is still gonna be there, but then as you can see on method foo on line 8, the variable a is gonna hold value 8. No, it's actually this. A is gonna be 8 because 8 is passed through this function, this method, see a through 8 pass through this. Then the next step, at bar on line 14, the local variable is going to be 6 since a equals bar a minus 2. A that we have is 8. 8 minus 2 is 6. So 6 is going to be passed through the method bar. And then it's going to be minus 1. It's going to be subtracted by 1. So the local variable a bar method is going to be 5. Then 5 is going to be printed, which give us the program output 5. There's going to be added 1, which basically means increment. It's going to be incremented. Then the return value is going to be 6. Well, a local to bar is going to be 5, but the return value is now going to be 6 because it is added 1. Um, the next thing, it goes back because bar has already done with its execution. Then a gonna gonna have the return value of 8, right? See, minus 2. Now a is gonna have the return value of 6 because bar a minus 2 is 6. 6 is passed through bar is minus 1, then printed, which is 5. Then is added by 1 again, so effectively return the exact same a that we had. So a here is going to be 6. Okay, just a little temperature check that we that I find pretty necessary that we have. Um, can you all use the raise your hand the raise your hand button in the meeting? Just a quick temperature check. Okay. Okay, let's be quick on this. Um, type 1 in the chat if you have no clue what I've been saying on this problem. Oh, I can see that too. The recording will be available for later review, definitely. Oh, okay. Also, since I can see some people type 2, I guess type 2 if you think you have some idea about this at least. You at least have some idea about what I'm talking about. And also definitely type 1 if you have no clue what I've been talking about for this kind of problem. Just so I know how should I process, because if I know that someone is like really struggle with what I'm talking about, I can definitely rephrase my idea. Do we have to boil every single code for the second part? Oh, okay, build, my bad. Build every single code for the second part of the exam. Um, if the exam requires that you do a code snippet or a full implementation, then you definitely have to do that. But
Yeah,
otherwise,
we're not
um,
familiar with the format of the exam.
yeah, I'm honestly not quite familiar with the format of the exam, but there's ones that I had to actually implement a whole program. I think it's for the final, right? It was back then. It was for the final, but for the midterm, I don't think I really have to really implement the a whole program. but sometimes it might ask you for a snippet, a small code, a small section of code. Okay, let me go ahead and complete this complete this one so that I can quickly move on to the Q&A. I can see that what I can see I can see that every one of us here is very interested in having questions. So I definitely be quick on this, and then we move on to the Q&A. Okay, since a is now equals 6, it's gonna print 6. As you can see here, program output 6 is gonna be printed since a is holding the value 6. Then it's gonna return a. What does this return statement mean? It is the return value of this foo function, foo method, and it's gonna go straight to variable a here. And the value that this variable a is gonna hold, of course, is 6, because the return value is 6. Let me go ahead and show you the return value here, 6. 6, then a will show 6 over here, of course, because exactly that's what I said. Then for the second line, it's gonna run b equals bar a. And what is a? A is 6. Then 6 is gonna pass through bar 6, and then with 6 in mind, a is going to be equal to a minus 1, which means a is now going to hold the value 5 for bar. It's going to hold equal the value 5. That's going to be print, is going to print a, which is whatever value the variable a is holding, which is 5. Then it's going to print another 5, as you can see here. It's going to give you another 5. Then it's going to return a plus 1, which is 5 plus 1, which is 6. Then b is going to now hold the value 6, because it is return a6, return back to b. Now b is now holding 6. But what we actually care about is what this one is going to print, which is 565. It doesn't really return anything since this is the void. This method is void method. So that completes our that really completes our visualization of this kind of problem. And it should also conclude the the theory that we have to keep in mind when we do this kind of these kind of problem, these kind of exam. And yeah, we should have already covered all of the all of the theory that we need. And now let me stop share. And yeah, we should be good for the Q&A session. Okay. Um, what are the code practices that the midterm exam one will cover? Um, if you have a look at the study guide should be the most comprehensive guide that you have for this final exam. And this should be enough, because almost all of the problem that's gonna be on exam one is gonna be some variation, some modification of whatever you see on the study guide. It shouldn't be so much more, it should not be so much more difficult than what is shown on the study guide. It's just some changes, a little bit of variation of the study guide. Are you able to disclose the actual coding segment relative difficulty? Um, If the coding segment means what I just walk us through, then just like I said, the difficulty shouldn't be so much more than what we already have. And if you're good and you really understand what I walked you all through, then you should be good for the coding question. The advice given was to redo the lab challenges and you should be fine. The lab challenges are good for you to study the methods, the syntax, which mean whatever you have to type the spelling, basically, the syntax, the methods, how to use them. The lab challenges are wonderful for that for that purpose. But for code tracing, just like what I just walked you all through, I don't think the lab challenges really cover that well. So that's also something that you should definitely have a look on the study guide. Okay. Okay. I think the midterm does have some coding up to chapter 7 material, I think. Um, Api, can you let everyone knows what chapter will this midterm cover?
I just asked the professor for like what to cover during the midterm review, and he just asked me to go over the midterm review study guide. So
Mhm.
I'm guessing it's just like all the things you've covered until the midterm. I'm not too sure about that, but your midterm study guide is your best bet. So just refer that. And as I said before, we're not really sure about the format of the exam, so we don't really know if you can have a cheat sheet or any of that. So any questions related to the exam setup and format, it's better if you reach out to the professor or the TA of the class.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Is the tutoring center open? Yes, it is open, by the way. What time does it close? Um, Let me actually give us all the link. If you have a look at the chat section, there's a link that I just gave. This link has everything about the tutoring center. It has the course supported, and the hours for each day. And if you want to know about today, then the tutoring center is gonna open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. today. And if you want to know tomorrow, the weekend, then it's gonna open at 10 a.m. and it's gonna close at 5 p.m. for the weekend. Okay. Is the multiple choice part going to work like the first quarter exam? Uh, if you have a look also at the study guide, um, if the knowledge covered in the is already covered in the study guide, then it should be on the exam. So it should almost be quite similar. And like what I said, the actual exam is almost certainly gonna be some variation of what you have on the study guide. So it should be quite similar. Okay. For the future review session, can we review the study guide together? It was super helpful for first review. Um, I understand how useful is the study guide, and for the part that I have, for the this review session built almost is built almost entirely out of the study guide. If you have a look at the codes that I have, and even the examples that I have for the methods, It is drew almost entirely from the study guide. So the one thing that I really want you to always keep in mind is how useful the study guide is. Okay. Module 2 in midterm exam, the study guide did not have that covered. Coding module 2. Um, yeah, if the study guide already covered that, then it should be on the midterm exam. But another thing that you always have to keep in mind is that if you already receive an announcement or if you already receive more details on the exam itself, on the exam section in within the Canvas, if it says it's gonna cover which part, then you should definitely follow that. And the midterm exam study guide is a good way for you to visualize how difficult the question are gonna be and how the basically how the knowledge is gonna be asked is what it will be on the midterm study guide. Are we allowed to have cheat sheet? Yes. Um, it has to be handwritten. Yes. Okay. Is there a way you can share the presentation you cover as a link so that we can go over it again individually? Um, I
Um,
believe this is something that Abby can definitely handle.
yeah, I can send this recording to the professor and he can put it, like share it to you guys. So yeah, I think we can do that.
Yeah, wonderful. And I will be waiting for some more question. And beside that, I will be waiting for some more question for you. If you're more comfortable with typing your question in the chat box, go ahead and do that. But I will also really appreciate if you can turn on your mic and ask your question directly. That would be also good.